welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is your friendly neighborhood ghost, and I welcome you to our fourth episode of the Sanctum Files. We have another episode for you today. For our fourth episode, we will be diving into a discussion on the various iterations and versions of the Shadow, the Pulp incarnation, or the Pulp Avenger, and the Radio incarnation, choosing to pick a name out of from the Shadow Knows documentary, the Invisible Avenger. So with that being said, getting right into the Pulp incarnation, when we are first introduced to the Shadow, he is a very mysterious character. Not much is known about him, or people heavily speculate on him, both criminals and his allies alike, about who he could be or what his face could look like, because a lot of people speculate because of his slouch hat, no one can see anything but his eyes. It is, of course, hinted at by Spotter in The Living Shadow that the Shadow's face could potentially be bandaged, and it's not even remotely hinted at until the second issue, The Eyes of the Shadow, that we are introduced to Lamont Cranston. And it's also that one that we meet Burbank as well, one of the Shadow's agents, and his communications man, or at least that's the role he would inhabit eventually. So people, I imagine, were at the time just assumed, oh, the Shadow is Lamont Cranston. And that's kind of left it at that for a while. It's not until, of course, that we find out that in the next book after that, that it's quickly put to bed that, oh no, he's not Lamont Cranston, because there is a real Lamont Cranston, and he actually does go on to become one of the Shadow's agents. A lot of that information is detailed in my book, Shadowed Circle members, back after I did my interview with them. Their editor, Steve, and I talked after our interview was over, and he offered to give me a book, which I was wanting to buy anyway, but he sent me a copy on Amazon as a thank you gift. And I've been enjoying reading that ever since. I'm actually in the middle of reading chapter 3 as of recording this video. So a lot of the information I have got from some of this that I'm talking about is from this book, but also from the Shadow Knows documentary, and just asking various different questions from people and getting information. So my sources are a little bit all over the place. But anyway, it is revealed in the Shadow Laughs in the third story that there is a real Lamont Cranston. He later on becomes one of the Shadow's agents, and the Shadow basically reveals himself to Lamont Cranston and is like, you need to leave. Right now, your identity is an asset to me. We can't both be here. And the real Lamont basically has no choice. And he's like, okay, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your purpose is here, but I wish you all the best of luck. And then he literally goes back to sleep and then wakes up like early that next morning and then just goes home and then just like is gone. But the real Lamont Cranston does come back in some later stories, the Hydra being one of them that I can think of. It's also later revealed that, of course, the Shadow's true identity is that of World War I aviation pilot, the Dark Eagle, and also a spy by the name of Kent Allard. He did various intelligence work during World War I through different countries. He is fluent in multiple different languages. Looking back at chapter 1 from Gangland's Doom, he has knowledge in such different languages as German, Russian, French, and it's just like many different languages. And there's many others. Great deal of learning in the fields of chemistry, biology, and physics. Knowledge of poisons and gases, the Devil's Whisper, He puts his two fingers on reactive different chemicals. He snaps his fingers, a loud blast and intense light. Because chapter one goes off from the identity that the Shadow reveals himself in the aptly titled book, The Shadow Unmasks, which is where we learn about his World War I aviation background. But the chapter goes into more detail and actually gives different references and actually even references different titles, pulp titles, and even goes as far as to say page numbers to calculate. No, there's actually more information that's gleaned here, and the Shadow Unmasked, he doesn't fully reveal all about himself. The case is revealed, such as the case with the Shadow's Ring. It's originally stated in that book that he got that, or at least that, or a later story that he got his ring from a Native American tribe down like Guatemala or somewhere down there when he had in that area when he had a plane crash. But it is revealed in both a mixture of the Red Menace and the Romanov jewels that the jewel itself is actually from Russia because of a passage meeting with Prince Zuvor or Richard Albion in the Red Menace. He opens his ring to reveal a star underneath, and it's revealed to show that he was a member of the Seventh Star. There's just more to it. Language, various different languages, Jiu-Jitsu, read and write in Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, Hindu, Afghan, Gypsy, Esperanto, Spanish. Yep, that's about to talk about Teeth of the Dragon. The Shadow of the Pulps also has multiple, of course, agents. We, of course, meet his first prominent agent, the man known as Harry Vincent, who the Shadow saves because when we first meet him, he was trying to basically jump off a bridge. And from then on, he basically gives him a choice. Either we can take you back to the bridge, or I can improve your life, I can change your life, and you work for me. Or if you work for me, you're basically doing it for the rest of your life. And he's like, okay. And Harry Benson appears in numerous stories. But of course, he's not the only agent that we meet. As I mentioned in Eyes of the Shadow, we meet Burbank. And then just from there, the list just keeps unfolding. People like Cliff Marsland, Margot Lane, who was introduced only after the radio show because of her popularity and her character. So Walter Gibson wrote her into the pulps. Because prior to that, we didn't actually, there weren't really any female agents of the Shadow. Yeah, going over this, we also end up meeting Joe Cardona in one of the stories. He works as a police detective, but he does end up becoming a agent of the Shadow later on. Clyde Burke, a reporter for the Classic. Miles Crofton. Also, now I'm just reading to you people's names from part of the chapter. I had some of these written down earlier. Velma Coral, who appears in The Wasp. She was called back in service of the Wasp, but she secretly worked for the Shadow to destroy the criminal. At the conclusion of that case, she had proven herself and the law that she had reformed and could lead a normal life. As I mentioned before, the real Lamont Cranston, Jericho Druth, Bruce Duncan, who was first met in Eyes of the Shadow, in the Red Menace. Duncan popped up for a third time, Atoms of Death, because he was injured in the story. His role was not very large. Someone named Slide Pharaoh. The story there is from the Broken Napoleons, but he first met him in a story called The Green Box from March 15th, 1934. Kings of Crime, Road to Crime. The Broken Napoleons was the one where Pharaoh was not in, was like kind of the last time we see him. Claude Fellows, who we meet in, it was Kingdoms of Doom. But no, I was thinking Cliff Marsland. No, it was Cliff Marsland. He was a different one, but had a similar function. Yeah, from Mobsman on the Spot. They were both kind of like underworld type individuals. Marsland was serving a prison sentence for a crime he didn't commit. Big spoiler. So if you don't want to hear this next part, I suggest you skip ahead like 15 seconds. But Claude Fellows actually dies in Kingdom's Doom. So he is so far, as far as this book, it says Claude Fellows is the only agent of the Shadow to die in the line of duty. but his tasks were later taken over by Burbank and Rutledge Mann. And he did have, well, not necessarily recruited. Actually, no, she was recruited later. It's a female agent, Myra Reldon. We first meet her when she is disguised in the teeth of the dragon. And she later returned in the story The Gold Pagoda, which I have that one. That's in volume 17. And I have the Teeth of the Dragon and Jade Dragon in volume 118. She shows up here also in the Invincible Shiwan Con, and just the chapter goes into a little bit more about her as well. The Pulp Shadow was popular enough that other people were inspired to write stories with similar characters. Some of those characters were, of course, the more violent, but as equally entertaining reads for the Spider, the Master of Disguise, Secret Agent X, as long as other characters such as the Black Bat, a character named Captain Zero, and the Phantom Detective. There is, of course, one other major influence that came into comics, but I am going to save that particular individual for his own video, because there is a huge story and a lot more of a rabbit hole when it comes to that person. Now, talking about the radio incarnation, there were many different people who portrayed the radio version incarnation of the Shadow, because he started off as this bodiless narrator. He is only seen, only heard, and that was originally just for an advertisement for their Detective Story Hour magazine. The first actor to give voice to the Shadow was a man named James Locurdo, who you actually can see a little bit of a picture or a tiny illustration of his character in several of the early pulp stories. Ones that come to mind are The Death Tower and Silent Seven, and I think even The Black Master, because on the bottom right-hand corner of the pulps, there's a little small section where you see just a small little illustration. And I want to say, I think the cover of the Silent Seven is supposed to be like a silver gray type cover, and the Shadow is wearing a hood. They're supposedly trying to imply that the omniscient narrator that Locurdo was in the radio show is supposed to be like that. He has a monk's hood and just really eerie. Sadly, none of Locurdo's recordings have survived the test of time, and he only did it for what sounded like a handful of episodes, but he was later replaced by Frank Reddick Jr., whose introduction and voice opening you can hear in the first radio episode of The Shadow from September 26, 1937, The Death House Rescue, which was the first episode to feature Orson Welles, and that kind of gets into the other ones. Outside of Orson Welles, there was Bill Johnstone, and for a little bit of an interim role, we had John Archer. But I think, if I remember correctly, it was John Archer was more towards in Brett Morrison's line during Brett Morrison's run as well. And of course, after that, we have Morrison himself. I've heard other people say, and I can kind of get where people are saying, but Orson Welles does a good Lamont Cranston. Bill Johnstone has a really good Shadow voice. John Archer, I can't really say one way or the other. I mean, my favorite episode from his is the Case of the Flaming Skull, and which is fun because it has a notable opening, not by Frank Reddick's voice or anything, or even the actor reading the line. It's an opening done by Peter Lorre, which I found was really fun. That episode's widely, you can listen to that on YouTube. I'll actually put that into the description of this video when it goes on YouTube. And of course, Brett Morrison, who combines the best of the best of Wells and Johnstone, and is basically what considered to be like kind of the best version of the radio incarnation. The show went from 1937 to December 26, 1954, but sadly and tragically, because of just the lack of care, I imagine, or preservation, large chunks of Morrison's radio show are lost, but a few have surviving scripts. It is just no recordings have yet been discovered. In fact, the final episode of Morrison's season, which was the ending of the radio show itself, is called Murder by the Sea, and that comes from December 26th of 1954. But the only one of the 1954 season that we have so far been able to find preserved, because it's available on YouTube, and I have seen this episode in, I believe, either one or two sets from the radio show collection when Radio Spirits was had the license and was printing them. This was Vengeance of Angelina Nolan. But I did find an interesting one online. This was an Australian produced episode, but apparently, according to the Wikipedia page, although obviously can't take everything Wikipedia says for sure, so you have to take it as a grain of salt. In Australia, I found out there is a lost episode that was transcribed, and it is on YouTube. It's The Red Domino. I will put that in the description of this video as well if you guys are interested in wanting to listen to that at all. The Shadow of the Radio Show is much more straightforward and a lot less complex than the Pulp iteration of the Shadow. For one, he is just Lamont Cranston, not
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
Kent Allard. He's not a pilot. He's not a spy. It's just one man. He doesn't have multiple agents. He only has his friend and companion, Margot Lane, that's how she got her popularity, was of course from the radio show. They picked Margot, from what I understand, because they wanted someone to not so much as compliment, but to have a vocal contrast instead of it having just be two men talking, or two men for one, like a male sidekick and the protagonist. They wanted a difference, so that way we know, oh, this is who's talking, this is who's talking. And their conclusion was that they needed a female voice. But from when I talked to somebody who has a copy of it, I'm referring to, of course, the Shadow. I want to say it was either the Shadow scrapbook. In the back of the book, or in the middle, there is actually an original earlier draft of the Death House Rescue radio episode that actually would have featured Harry Vincent in the Margot Lane role. He would have been the Shadow's friend and companion, or at least been his aide in the show. But for whatever reason, they decided to change it for Margot. And for comic relief, they added Mo Shrevnitz, the cab driver. Of course, we would later see him in live action, played by Peter Boyle in the '94 Alec Baldwin film, and one of the Kane Richmond Shadow film, played by an actor named Peter Dugan. Harry Vincent had the Mo Shrevnitz role in the 1940 Victor Jory Shadow serial. The inspirations for the radio show I've found that are two different characters, and this is more of the fact that they are the voiceless narrators and not like characters in the actual show. One of them, and I've seen both of these on YouTube as well. I'll put a link in the description for the episodes that I have found, that I listen to, but feel free to listen to whatever ones you want. They are the Mysterious Traveler and the Whistler. The Mysterious Traveler is more like someone you would meet on a trip. They put it in the way that you're on a train ride with somebody in a compartment, and the man is just telling you a story to pass the time. and the Whistler is kind of the same way but it's weird. He has this obviously this certain whistle and this noise that's made, but from the way the characters act in the show, they make it sound like they can hear that noise, like it's like, uh-oh, there's something going on here. It's like I have a bad feeling about this, that kind of thing. Now, again, I'm not going to go into this and say I could be 100% right about this. I could be wrong. If someone has listened to more Whistler than I have, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, or just let me know, hey, you're wrong, idiot. This is what it's actually about, or he actually does appear in the show. It's like, okay, let me know. Other than that, and after that, that's really about it. Those are at least some of the key differences anyway. There's more, but I wanted to highlight the main differences. How complex and rich the Pulp Shadow's history is, and while the radio incarnation is entertaining, and I will admit that's how I first became aware of the Shadow, because my parents had a bunch of the radio cassette tapes from the show of the Shadow. One that stands out in particular for me is a Brett Morrison episode, The Shadow's Revenge. And of course, later on, I watched the 94 Alec Baldwin Shadow film. And that's kind of how I fell in love with the Shadow. I didn't start reading the Shadow pulps until I was in high school. The first one I can recall picking up was from my local library during my sophomore year of high school, going into junior year, so 2012 going into 2013, was the third Shadow. That's the Sanctum novels, or at least how it was called, Nostalgia Ventures reprint number 7. And that's also why I like the Bill Johnstone episode, The Shadow Challenge, because I like that because it has a similar premise to it. It's an imposter of the Shadow trying to use his name to commit crimes, and it's just like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. And that's how I like that one. And then after that, I read The Voodoo Master, which is the Sanctum books number 3. And from there, I just grew to enjoy and love the character more. It's just like, yeah, I want to read more about this. I've read somewhere now in the realm of half a dozen of these now, including the 2 that I mentioned. I have also published me doing some audio readings from a couple Shadow Pulps. Right now, I read the first chapter in the Hydra and the first chapter in the Black Falcon, and there's a couple more I've lined up to want to read and do videos for. I do those all in the reference of saying, for this particular character from this dialogue, please see my video where I read this chapter. But again, that's just an example. Plus, I want to, like I said at the beginning of a different episode, my goal is to want to bring in new readers and new fans of the character. So I want to give a new person just enough information to want to potentially hook that person into wanting to read and know more. I want to give them just a sprinkle or just a hint or a glint of information, and if it piques their interest, here's the rest of it. But again, that's just me, and that's the way I structure things. I understand people might be completely different, or people are different on certain things. That's what makes us all human. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a long-winded tangent video. I apologize for not having regular scheduled uploads. Uh, I have had a family incident that I've had to take in, been had to be involved in. I won't really go into too much detail about that. That and just my general work schedule. But I wanted to put this out to you guys and to say that I am going to try to do something at least once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks to hopefully try to get myself more back on track. I am probably going to do my next episode on the comics and films, or I am going to do a deep dive on a different character with a connection to the Shadow. I don't know yet. I need to put some notes together on those and go ahead more. But I hope you all enjoyed this little rant of mine. and I look forward to seeing you all again with another episode. To watch or listen to the Sanctum Files podcast, follow me on Spotify. Simply search the Sanctum Files in your search bar and be sure to click that follow button. Or you can follow me through my YouTube channel, Ghost Warrior 38, or search in your search bar the Sanctum Files podcast, and be sure to like if you enjoyed this episode. Comment below either your favorite pulp novel, or let me know your favorite radio episode and who is your favorite shadow. I like each of the actors for different reasons. For me, my favorite Orson Welles episode was the Death House Rescue. Favorite Bill Johnstone episode is, of course, as I said before, the Shadow Challenge. And Brett Morrison, mine was The Shadow's Revenge, because that's nostalgia for me, because that's the first ever Shadow Radio episode I ever watched. Bill Johnstone, or not Johnstone, John Archer, I listened to the Case of the Flaming Skull. But anyway, until next time, I will see you all later. Take care. Welcome, everybody, and fellow agents. This is your friendly neighborhood ghost here, and I welcome you to join me on this journey as we explore the world of the Master of Darkness and the Pulp Avenger, the Shadow, and through his various forms in the pulps, comics, film, and radio. Join me through interviews and discussions as we bring the world of the Master of Darkness to you. To find this show, simply follow me through Spotify. Simply search the Sanctum Files podcast, and through my YouTube channel, Ghost Warrior 38. Until then, fellow agents, I will see you all next time.